The clock on the pristine white wall of the Sterling mansion ticked faintly, its rhythm echoing in the cavernous silence of a house that usually brimmed with life. But for the last week, the walls had heard nothing but muffled sobs, anxious whispers, and the quiet hum of machines brought in from the hospital. Isabella Sterling, the only daughter of wealthy industrialist Charles Sterling, lay on the soft bed in her room, surrounded by plush toys and golden frames of happier times. She was 17 years old, vibrant and brilliant only a few weeks ago, and now the doctors had whispered the unthinkable: 7 days left. 7 days, and the disease gnawing away at her lungs would silence her laughter forever. Her mother, Eleanor, a woman known in high society for her elegance and composure, had not left her daughter's side. The shine of her jewelry had dulled under the constant stream of tears. Charles busied himself with calls to the world's best specialists, trying to buy more time with the same stubborn belief that money could fix anything. But money had met its match. Even the most expensive treatments had failed, and now all they could do was wait. In the background of this grieving household was Marcus Daniels, a long-serving employee at the mansion. Marcus was a tall, broad-shouldered man with skin like rich mahogany, lines of age carved deep around his eyes, and a quiet dignity that commanded respect without ever demanding it. For 22 years he had been the family's driver and groundskeeper, often invisible to the world of lavish dinners and glittering galas, but always present when the Sterlings needed something. He had watched Isabella grow from a bright-eyed child who loved to ride on his shoulders to a young woman whose heart had not been spoiled by her wealth. She was 17 years old, vibrant and brilliant only a few weeks ago, and now the doctors had whispered the unthinkable: 7 days left. 7 days, and the disease gnawing away at her lungs would silence her laughter forever. Her mother, Eleanor, a woman known in high society for her elegance and composure, had not left her daughter's side. The shine of her jewelry had dulled under the constant stream of tears. Charles busied himself with calls to the world's best specialists, trying to buy more time with the same stubborn belief that money could fix anything. But money had met its match. Even the most expensive treatments had failed, and now all they could do was wait. In the background of this grieving household was Marcus Daniels, a long-serving employee at the mansion. Marcus was a tall, broad-shouldered man with skin like rich mahogany, lines of age carved deep around his eyes, and a quiet dignity that commanded respect without ever demanding it. For 22 years he had been the family's driver and groundskeeper, often invisible to the world of lavish dinners and glittering galas, but always present when the Sterlings needed something. He had watched Isabella grow from a bright-eyed child who loved to ride on his shoulders to a young woman whose heart had not been spoiled by her wealth. She always spoke to him with kindness, always remembered his birthday with a smile and a card she'd drawn herself. On that bleak Monday morning, Marcus was polishing the family's sleek black car when Eleanor walked past him, her hand clutching a tissue. He could see her chest heave with silent sobs, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Something stirred inside him, a need to act, to do more than just stand by and watch the girl he loved like his own fade away. But what could he do? He wasn't a doctor, wasn't a scientist, wasn't rich. He was just the employee, the man who kept the mansion's grounds neat and the cars shining. Yet as he stared at Isabella's window above, a memory surfaced that made his heart pound. Years ago, before he'd come to work for the Sterlings, Marcus had grown up in the Deep South, raised by his grandmother, who believed in more than medicine. She had taught him old songs, stories of hope, and traditions that spoke to the spirit more than the body. "The body breaks," she would tell him, "but the spirit, oh, the spirit can move mountains." She had taught him how to play the guitar, how to sing hymns that made even the coldest heart weep. Music, she'd said, could heal what doctors could not. Marcus had long abandoned those songs, embarrassed by them in the world of glittering mansions and modern machines. But now, he wondered if that forgotten gift could give Isabella something no one else could: peace in her final days. That evening, when the house fell quiet and Eleanor finally drifted into an exhausted sleep, Marcus knocked gently on Isabella's door. She lay pale, her breaths shallow, her once lively eyes dulled but still curious. "Marcus?" she whispered, her voice frail. "Yes, Miss Bella," he said softly, using the nickname he'd given her as a child. "I was wondering if you'd like me to sit a while." She managed the faintest smile. "Please. Everyone looks so sad. It feels heavy in here." Marcus nodded, pulling up a chair. For a long moment he sat silently, his large hands fidgeting as though holding an invisible instrument. Then, with a deep breath, he asked, "Would you like to hear a song, something my grandma used to sing to me when I was sick?" Her eyes flickered with interest. "A song?" she whispered, her voice frail. "Well, yes, ma'am. Not fancy, just something from the heart." Isabella nodded weakly, and Marcus began to hum. His voice was deep, resonant, like the sound of earth itself. Slowly he shaped words into melody, an old hymn about hope, about light breaking through darkness. His voice filled the room, not loud, but steady, wrapping Isabella in warmth. Her eyes closed, her lips curved faintly, and for the first time in days, the tension in her face eased. Unseen, Eleanor had woken and stood in the doorway. She froze, her hand covering her mouth as tears welled again, but this time they weren't from sorrow, they were from the sight of her daughter resting peacefully, soothed by the voice of the man who had served their family quietly all these years. From that night forward, Marcus made it his mission. Every evening after his duties, he would sit with Isabella, singing her old songs, telling her stories from his childhood, painting pictures with words of fields filled with fireflies and skies ablaze with stars. Isabella, though weak, began to laugh again, soft, fragile laughter, but real. She would ask him to tell the one about the fox who outsmarted the hunters, or to sing the hymn about the river that never stopped flowing. The doctors were astonished. Her vitals, which had been declining steadily, seemed to hold steady. No, the disease was not gone, but her spirit was stronger, her days brighter. She was living, truly living, in those 7 days she had left. Charles noticed too. At first, he had dismissed Marcus's visits as sentimentality, but when he saw his daughter smile again, saw her eat a few bites of food with interest, he felt a lump in his throat. This was something money had not bought. On the 4th night, Isabella looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes. "You make me forget, Marcus, forget that I'm dying. You make me feel alive." His own eyes brimmed, but he swallowed hard. "That's because you're alive, Miss Bella. Every breath you take is a gift, and sometimes all we need is a song to remind us." Eleanor, who sat beside her daughter, squeezed Marcus's hand. "You don't know what you've given us," she whispered. Her jeweled fingers trembled in his rough, calloused hand. But Marcus shook his head gently. "No, ma'am. She's always been here. Just needed a little light to shine again." As the 7th day crept closer, the entire household seemed transformed. The staff, once subdued, now spoke softly of the music that drifted from Isabella's room each night. Even Charles, hardened by years of business battles, sat quietly in the corner one evening, listening to Marcus's voice tremble through a hymn of hope. Tears rolled down his cheeks, silent, as he realized that his fortune could not have bought this gift of peace, of love, of connection. On the night before the doctor's grim prediction was to end, Marcus brought in his old guitar, dusty from years in the attic. He tuned it carefully, and when Isabella saw it, her eyes lit up faintly. "Play it," she whispered, "please." And so he did. He played as if the strings were woven from his very soul, each note carrying the weight of his prayers, his love, his desperate hope that somehow, against all odds, she might stay. The music filled the room, filled the mansion, filled the hearts of everyone who heard it. Eleanor wept open. The morning sun crept gently into Isabella's room, bathing her pale face in golden light. Eleanor had dozed off in the chair beside her, one hand still holding her daughter's. Marcus had remained awake most of the night, sitting quietly with his guitar across his lap, praying silently for a miracle. Doctors had said 7 days. That morning marked the 7th. Every tick of the clock seemed to press on everyone's chest, reminding them that time was running out. But when Isabella stirred and opened her eyes, her faint smile carried a strange radiance, as though the music of the night before had breathed something eternal into her. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice like the flutter of wings. Eleanor jolted awake, tears streaming instantly. "Oh, my sweet girl!" she sobbed, pressing her lips to Isabella's forehead. The doctors arrived later, expecting decline, expecting to confirm what they had already warned. But instead, they found her heart steady, her breath weak but still fighting. Confusion crossed their faces. "It's impossible," one muttered. "By all our measures, she shouldn't be here." Charles, who had been pacing the hallway like a caged lion, stopped in his tracks when he heard those words. He rushed into the room, his hard features softening as he saw his daughter still alive, still breathing, still smiling faintly. For the first time in years, the unshakable businessman dropped to his knees beside her bed and wept. He wept like a child, gripping her fragile hand as though he could anchor her soul to the earth. "Daddy," Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible, "don't cry. I'm not afraid anymore." Those words cut through Charles like a blade. He had built empires, crushed competitors, bought everything his heart desired, yet none of it could change the ticking clock of his daughter's life. And here she was, comforting him. The following days passed like stolen gifts. Every moment felt borrowed, yet precious. Marcus continued to come with his songs, his stories, and his guitar. The Sterlings, once distant in their grief, began to gather with him. Eleanor would sit quietly, her head resting on Isabella's shoulder as the music filled the room. Charles, though uncomfortable at first, started humming along, his deep voice awkward but sincere. The mansion that had been drowning in sorrow now pulsed with something else. Love, raw and unpolished, but real. One evening, Isabella asked for something that surprised them all. "I want to go outside," she said. Her body was frail, her legs too weak to carry her. But Marcus and Charles exchanged a look. Without hesitation, Marcus scooped her gently into his strong arms, and Charles followed, holding the oxygen tank carefully. Eleanor trailed behind, her hand pressed to her heart. They carried her into the garden Marcus had tended for years, the roses trimmed to perfection, the paths swept, the fountain glistening in the twilight. Isabella's eyes lit up at the sight of the flowers bathed in the setting sun. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "I almost forgot how much I loved this place." Marcus set her gently onto a cushioned bench. He He pulled out his guitar and began to strum softly, while the family gathered close. Isabella closed her eyes, inhaling the cool evening air, and for a moment it was as though she wasn't sick at all. She was just a girl, loved by her family, surrounded by music and nature. Neighbors who lived nearby heard the faint strains of music drifting through the estate's iron gates. Some paused on their evening walks, listening in awe, unaware of the miracle unfolding within. For in that moment, something beyond medicine, beyond money, was taking place. That night, as Marcus carried her back inside, Isabella whispered in his ear, "Promise me something." "Anything, Miss Bella," he murmured. "When I'm gone, don't let my parents forget this. Don't let them forget what love feels like. Promise you'll keep singing for them." His throat tightened, but he nodded. "I promise." The following morning, Isabella didn't wake. Her body, exhausted from the battle, finally gave in. But her face was serene, her lips curved as though she had fallen asleep smiling. Eleanor's scream tore through the mansion, raw and shattering, as she clutched her daughter's lifeless form. Charles staggered backward, his world collapsing in silence. And Marcus wept quietly at the doorway, his hand pressed against the wood as though holding himself up. He had known this moment was coming, but nothing could dull the pain of it. The funeral was grand, as expected of the Sterlings, with hundreds of mourners, flowers imported from every corner of the world, and eulogies that spoke of Isabella's kindness and light. Yet what everyone remembered most wasn't the speeches or the wealth displayed, it was the song. At Eleanor's request, Marcus stood before the gathered crowd, his guitar in hand, his deep voice trembling as he sang the same hymn that had carried Isabella through her final days. His voice broke midway, tears streaming down his face, but he kept going, pouring his soul into every note. By the end, even the most hardened of guests were wiping tears from their eyes. Eleanor wept openly, clutching Charles's hand, who, for the first time, did not pull away. After the service, Eleanor approached Marcus, her eyes swollen but her spirit steadier. She took his hand in hers. "You gave her peace. You gave us peace. I can never repay you." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't do nothing special, ma'am. Just gave her what I had. A song. A little light." But Charles stepped forward, his expression different from the man who once only measured worth in dollars. He looked at Marcus, his voice hoarse. "No, Marcus, you gave us what money could never buy. You gave us our daughter back, even if only for a week." The days turned to weeks, and though grief remained, something had changed in the Sterling household. Eleanor began spending less time at glamorous events and more time with charities for children's hospitals. Charles softened, no longer consumed entirely by business, but by the need to honor his daughter's memory. And Marcus remained by their side, no longer just the employee, but something more. Family. One evening, weeks after the funeral, Eleanor found Marcus in the garden, tending to the roses as he had always done. She stepped forward, tears brimming again. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I'll never forget what you did for her, what you did for us. You left me in tears that night, not because of sorrow, but because you reminded me what it means to love." He looked up, his eyes glistening, and nodded softly. "That's all she ever wanted, ma'am, for y'all to remember." From then on, whenever Eleanor felt the crushing weight of loss, she would ask Marcus to sing, and he would, each note carrying the memory of Isabella, the girl who had only 7 days to live, yet lived them more fully than most live in a lifetime. And though her body rested beneath the earth, her spirit remained alive in every melody, every story, every tear shed and every smile that followed. Because of what the black employee had done, not with money, not with medicine, but with love, her memory became eternal.